Hello, it's me, INSANIRE Constantine. So, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my pre-birth experience, what the Shining One had told me, and eventually what had happened when I was much older, when I had done research into reincarnation and pre-birth experiences and all that stuff. Well, in the beginning of my pre-birth experience, when the Shining One had met with me before I came into the world, this shining being had told me or informed me that in my past life I had killed hundreds of people. So, was it some kind of karmic debt? Some kind of karmic debt to be paid? I wouldn't know. It seemed kind of odd, like some kind of controlling system was in place. I often think about God and the angels, and the devil and the fallen angels. And when you look at it, granted it be two sides, it's still the same coin. I'm a little suspicious about the whole archangels, angels. There's something not right there. So this shining being could have been a guardian angel or an angel, a messenger. So I did my research into religions and spirituality, mysticism, and I first started out with Christianity, reading the Bible. That's when I came across Job 33, Job's dream vision, which is very interesting. I believe it starts at verse 14 or 13, but Job 33, verse 13 to like verse 20, 24. And for me, that whole entire section is about reincarnation, where a messenger, 1 out of 1,000, will speak up for you so you can return to the days of your youth, fresh as a child, a baby. Well, anyways, I was in Nebraska, and I decided to talk to somebody about this during my research, and I just happened to speak with a Catholic priest. He must have been the right one to talk with, because what he told me really blew me away. And I was in a certain city in Nebraska at the time, and as I talked with this Catholic priest and told him about my pre-birth experience, he looked at me and unequivocally told me that there were several others just like me around the world. He said, quote, "There's others like you around the world, at least several of you that we know of. You are what we call a lost article." And I'm like, a lost article? What is that? He would not explain any further. But this is where it got very interesting with this Catholic priest. He invited me to go with him to the Vatican to meet with the Pope. And this was in 2008. So this Pope was Pope Benedict the 16th. Well, I found it kind of strange and odd, and it did not sit well with me, so I turned him down. I did not want to see the Pope for many reasons. Well, some Catholics and even Protestant Christians got mad at me about this. They're like, you got invited to meet with the Pope and you turned it down? And they got really mean with me and said, how can you do such a thing like that? If I got invited to meet with the Pope, I would go. And these are coming not just from Catholics, but Protestant Christians, which I found kind of amusing. So no, I did not want to meet with the Pope. After all, what is it they know that they could be telling people? For me, that's irrelevant. Yes, I turned down meeting with the Pope. So, growing up as a child, I've had many encounters, and I will share those stories individually in separate videos. But I would like to mention that I did write a book of poetry. And the thing about poetry is neither fiction or nonfiction. It's just poetry. You can say anything and get away with it. And this book of poetry is called Job 33, and it deals with my research and experiences and encounters. So Job 33 is what I called it. And I have it up on Amazon. I just published it last year over the summer of 2021. So you might want to check that out. I did publish some other books of poetry this year covering various subjects and themes like sin eaters, witches, rebellionism, Gothic, Romanticism, Christian magic, various subjects that are contradictory and present a conundrum. So I have this thing that I like to say. I believe in the 3 C's. Contradictions, conundrums, and paradoxes, paradigms. Although it's not beginning with a C. But that's for my simple amusement. So I just simply call it the 3 C's. Because it's the contradictions in life that you have to pay attention to understand what's going on in this world and who we are as people, or human beings being human, or spiritual. In this world, at times, I feel like I'm a ghost. That weird ghost. At times I feel like we belong to this world and the universe. But there's something very fishy about archangels. I used to, well, I kind of started about a year ago praying. I would never pray. But as soon as I started praying to God and asking the angels to come into my life to help me out, some strange things started happening that were not pleasant. I would feel like my energy was sapped. I started having anxiety attacks every day for an entire year. I was having 1 to 7 anxiety attacks in one day, every day. I thought I was dying. I'd even wake up in the middle of sleeping and having an anxiety attack, or felt like I was dying. And I did not like that. It was a very horrible feeling. I had to go for walks. So I stopped praying. And I did my research about these archangels, and I see a lot of similarities or understandings, relations with the archons, the archontic forces, which is for a much later subject and later time to be talked about. But for now, I just wanted to get this video out there, get this talk to kind of clarify some things about part 1 of my pre-birth experience story. Growing up and in my research, what I had discovered and stuff like that, and what the Shining One had told me. I was told many things. I was told that there's going to be a lot of stuff happening in the world that would live a life of suffering. And I did when I was a young kid. It was like these things were forced into my life, and I didn't like that very much. Abuse. I went through physical and sexual abuse at a young age. It was very unpleasant. Because I was different and strange, I would be taken to mental hospitals and dropped off. And I didn't like that when my parents did that. But every time I'd go to these mental hospitals, the doctors would just get angry at my parents. Because after testing me and all that stuff with their psychological profiling stuff, they said there was nothing wrong with me. They said your son is a normal child. I was just unique, that's all, because I just remembered my pre-birth experience. I remembered before being born and coming into this world. And some people don't know how to deal with that. They'll treat you like you're crazy and throw you away like you're garbage. You know, but you don't allow that to affect you. So I ended up in foster care, group homes, up until I was 16 years old. But during that whole time, I would have deja vu, a lot of deja vu and vivid dreams and visions, and these dreams would like come true. It might not happen right away. It could happen in a week, or it could happen a couple to a few years down the road. That's how they would work. So there's a lot that I can share about. But I will admit, I will confess, that I don't have all the answers. No, I am just part of the answer. There's many others just like me. And they each have their own part of the answer too. So it is my hopes by putting this together and sharing it with you all, it can help you in your research. Again, if you appreciate this, if you like this, please like and subscribe. And I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening to me. Bye for now.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Well, I decided to make this video finally about the pre-birth experience, and I'm doing it because I'm sitting in traffic and I'm bored. So I don't even know where to start, honestly. But watching these other videos on the pre-birth experience is one of the main reasons why I'm making this video. I just feel like the story does need to get out. I feel like the whole reason why I've had this experience is to tell people about it. So that's what I'm doing. It's insane to hear other people talk about it, because all of our experiences are pretty much exactly the same, minus a few details, very little ones, very little details. I have a lot of detail though. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm special or anything like that, but when I hear people talk about it, I have a little bit more. And there's a reason for it, and I'll get into that as the video goes on. I'm going to try to make it short, because I know we all have short attention spans nowadays. Gotta let this motorcycle go by. Driving is more important right now. You go, be safe, man. Well, this is how it started for me. Basically, I started off and I was like, I'd want to say like a ball of energy, okay? And I was floating around, and I was experiencing pure bliss. It's the best feeling you could ever imagine. You can't describe it into words. You can't. I was basically receiving knowledge constantly about everything. I understood everything. I was so smart, yet so curious at the same time. One thing I did not hear people mention is that I had a body, and then I didn't at the same time. I was like a baby, a teenager, and an elderly person all at the same time. I was, again, I was a young baby, I was a teenager, and an elderly person. But I didn't see my hands or anything like that. I felt like I was all those ages at one time. I know that's very weird, but that's what I felt. And I was just kind of floating around, just flying around, just feeling so good. And then I felt something like calling me over behind me, like turn around, fly over here. I was being beckoned. Somebody was talking to me telepathically. I turned around and I saw three beings, three of them. I saw, it was a womanly figure and two males standing next to her side by side. I couldn't really see their faces, but they were just wearing, I would want to say, white robes, and I couldn't see her face. It was like just light, but I could see her hair. She was a brunette, and they were telling me to come down, and instantly I knew what was happening. I knew that they were going to send me here, and I did not want to come at all. I did not want to be here. I was like, nope. I remember fighting it really bad. Like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. And I was flying around a little more, just like, you know, when you're trying to tell your kid to go clean their room, and they're just like, they're trying to have fun before they go. That's what I was doing. I was like, no, I do not want to go to this place. And as I was doing that, I was kind of looking over to where I was going to go, Earth. And man, that was the first moment of fear that came over me. I was scared because I knew this place was going to be bad. I didn't want to be here, for sure. Compared to that, I didn't want to be here, and I was fighting it, and it got to the point where I was gonna go. I had no choice, and they were letting me know that you're gonna be okay. You're gonna be okay. You know, just come on down. And before I went down, I turned around and I saw them, and I looked, and it was a pool. It was a pool of water, and covering it was like a big awning, like old, I'd want to say like column. They were like columns, white columns. You know, like old, like Greek columns. You know, they were real defined, and they were just beautiful. And it was just covering this pool. And they were standing by the water, and I did not want to go into that water because I knew what that meant. So they beckoned me over, and at this point, I was fighting it. I had no choice. I was being pulled into the water, and I got into the water, and I was petrified. I knew what was going to happen. They were going to send me down. I didn't want to go, and I kept asking them, please, if I'm going to go, can you please let me remember this place? I want to remember. I want to remember. And they kept reassuring me, and they allowed me to remember. They allowed me to remember this place. And as I got that confirmation that they were going to allow me to remember, I was okay with going. And, you know, as I was in that water, I know for a fact they gave me a choice as to what life I want to live. I could have been rich, famous, and had it really easy, but my memory of heaven would have been gone, basically. I had to live a more difficult life here to remember that place. That was the deal, and I wanted that deal. because I wanted to remember. It was that important to me. The short amount of time that I'd be here, you know, that it's totally worth it to remember a place like this, because I have this understanding now, and you know, it's priceless, because I know for a fact that when we pass on, there is an afterlife and there is a heaven, because I've been there, and I remember without a doubt in my mind, without a doubt. And man, those people that were standing by the water, the woman and the two beings that were speaking to me, the love that you feel for these people is, again, something that you cannot put into words. You think you love your parents, you think you love your children if you have them, and it's nothing compared to the love that you feel when you're up there. At all. You cannot compare it. It's to the point where I actually miss them. I miss them very, very much. I think about them all the time. I think about this situation all the time. It's something that never leaves me. And I cannot wait to go back. I don't even, you know, I don't know what my purpose here is on planet Earth, but I can't wait to go back. That's the only thing I can say about that. So again, I got into the pool and I was scared. I was terrified because I remember looking at the place that I was gonna go to, Earth, and it is ugly. It was just, I remember it looking like a black bubbling mass of just pure evil, and I was petrified. I just knew this was gonna be tough. I knew this place was gonna be dark, and I knew this place needed work. And I just, I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go. Yet here I am. But I got in the water. I chose my life. I chose my mom. I do know that. I chose the family I wanted. I chose the body. I chose how I wanted to look. I chose a lot of things. There's a lot of things that you get to choose before you come here. I don't know if we all chose these things. I really don't. But I remember choosing myself. Got in the water, and I remember being sucked down. At this point, I was gone. I remember being sucked down into this like tube, and the fear came over me right then and there when I started getting sucked down into this tube. And as the further I went down, the memories started to fade away of that place, of heaven. It started to go away slowly, and I remember just like being really tired. I could hardly keep my eyes open, and I was just like, oh, here I go, kind of like a roller coaster. Just getting sucked down really, really fast. And one of the last things I remember from this whole entire memory is, the best way to describe it, I remember a vision. You know when you close your eyes and you look at a light, or maybe even the sun, and you can see the flesh color? I remember seeing that, and I'll say now, I know I was inside the womb, and I felt claustrophobic. I was inside of a body now, and it was extremely uncomfortable. I felt like I was suffocating. I had to get out. I was like, remember, just pushing against the wall, whatever, the womb. I was pushing and pushing, and that is the last thing I remember from that. And that is my first memory. That was my first memory. I remember being a tiny little child. When you start to become conscious, that is something that always stuck with me as I grew up. And as I got older, of course, I kind of started to forget about this, what happened to me. Until, I started surfing the internet at a young age, and I was so curious to figure. I'm 34 years old now, and I looked this up probably when I was like maybe 15, 16. And I wanted to look around. This is back in the, dial-up days, and I remember looking around, reading forums and things like that. And there was an old forum that was, up back in those days, with, the same people that experienced this. And they would, when they told their stories, and I read the stories and I watched the stories on YouTube today, and it is almost identical to what I experienced. And that's when I realized that really happened to me. So, that's my story, guys. Let me know what you think. And, before I end the video, I just want to say that we all can tell the difference between a dream and a memory, right? You have a dream. Sometimes your dream seems so real and you're like, you don't know until you wake up. But when you wake up, you realize that it was a dream. This was not a dream. I remember it like a memory. It's more vivid than any memory I've ever had. I can't remember where I left my car keys. I can't remember where I left my cell phone. But I remember this. So that's my story. And just let me know what you guys think. I know I'm leaving out a lot of things for sure, and something I know I'm going to regret not saying something when I end this video. I should think of something here. Okay, I got one last thing to say. God is real. Heaven is real. Love each other. Do good. Treat people how you want to be treated. Love each other. And that's it. Thanks, guys.
So with that being said, they brought me a life that was really perfect for this intention of mine. And so I reviewed this life and it was perfect. It was like almost as good as they get. And I accepted the life and I accepted the veil. Okay, so the veil of forgetfulness, this process of incarnating, is what I remember the most out of all of this. And that process is very abrupt and shocking. So in this life, I accepted the veil came over me, and then I was in the womb. But, okay, so when the veil came over me, I felt my knowing be cut off. I felt my vibration plummet from great heights down to the lower and lower, and go lower still, and then lower some more, and keep going lower and lower. And then you finally get there. And when you're there, it's so low, it's ridiculous, and you're cut off. I mean, at least for me, I felt cut off, and I felt like I didn't have that connectedness with other people anymore, other beings anymore. I didn't have my knowing anymore, and it was terrifying. And I wasn't even born yet. I was just in the womb, and I was terrified. And I was only there for a very, very short time. And I said, you know what? I'm not doing this. This is not happening. I mean, this is so ridiculous. This is so low vibration. This is so dark. I am not doing this. And I summoned my might and I smote the veil. I fought my way out. And I succeeded in doing that. And so I was on the other side again, but I had killed the fetus. I had killed the body that was to be mine. Thinking about it now, even I feel responsible for that. I feel sadness, because when I got to the other side, I had a life review. Even for that very short life, I had a life review, and I remember seeing the mother and all the hundreds of other people that would be negatively impacted. Well, I could feel how I negatively impacted the mother. I heaped more difficulty on her through the sorrow of her loss. And also hundreds of other people then that their lives would be made more difficult because I had made the mother's life more difficult. And I couldn't believe. I was like, well, I mean, it's really hard to describe, but I went in with great intentions. Like I had all these good intentions. I had this big plan, you know, and then and then my fear was so great that right at the beginning, I caused that. And I not only did I not succeed in my intention, but I caused the game to be more difficult for the players that I so loved and respected. That was how I mean, I'm using metaphors now. It's not quite like that, but so I was disappointed. I mean, I knew everything was okay. Everything is on the other side, you know, everything is well. It's okay. But and I was disappointed that I had let that happen. So I decided to, before I attempted this again, because I knew I would want to try again. Before I did that, I practiced accepting the veil, because I didn't want to have that. I didn't want to do that same thing again. So I remember going to this place that can only be described as like, I don't know, a veil acceptance simulator room. It was like a place you go where you practice surrendering to the veil and having your knowing cut off, and feeling separate and dark and alone. And it's kind of like diving into a pool, and then seeing how long you can stay underwater, but because this is just a trainer, you can jump back out if you get too scared, you know. But you practice. And I remember practicing, and basically it had to do with my willingness to feel the fear and my willingness to allow and not resist. So after doing that, they brought me this life. And this life was not as optimal as the first one would have been. It was still good. It was quite good. But each life is only so good because the soul, the spirit, is rather complex in what makes it up. And in my case, I just knew I had many qualities, and there's like a certain type of my nature, and that nature has to like interface with the life somehow, and then that has to work within the context of what you're trying to do, what you want to do. And this life was pretty good. You know, it wasn't perfect, but it was good. It was good. So I remember reviewing this life in great detail, and reviewing what I can only describe as a vast flow chart, or like a tree of all the things that might or could or would happen in this life. And it started like kind of like, if you imagine a tree like tipped on its side, like thicker trunk, and then like it went out to branches, and there's all these some paths were very likely, some paths were a lot less likely. But it wasn't about events. Well, there were definitely events in it, but it wasn't so much about events as how it would feel, how it would be to be that. Like, how will it be to be that person in these different possible avenues of how this life might unfold? And I went through millions of possibilities all within the blink of an eye. It was easy to do that. I remember reviewing just tons of huge amounts of information all at once. And I knew even then that it was very likely that I would experience a trauma in my 20s that would crush me, and that would help facilitate my opportunity to re-experience this fear that I wanted to re-experience and integrate. So I was super excited to do this, to accept this, even though I knew it would be hard. I knew that this body had certain limitations that other bodies do not, and that this body would be difficult in certain ways on a day-to-day level that would like challenge my ego or something. It would make it difficult for me in a way that I would be forced to turn inward, and I would have to find strength. And also I wouldn't be, because it's hard to explain, but I had a sense that it would be challenging enough to the ego that I would have to, I wouldn't be able to go totally down the ego path because it would be too challenging. So anyway, I reviewed all this, and I remember there having to be a moment to accept, and I don't remember that moment, but I do remember after that waiting for this to start the life. And I remember being in this state where I was still timeless, and it was wonderful. And I remember this light, this powerful light. And then I remember the guide coming to me and being like, all of a sudden, and not rude, but almost rude, like, now, go now, you have to go now, right now, you know, like getting my attention, like super like, now, buddy. And so I was like, okay, now. So then the next thing is I was at these beings that I can only describe as tinkerers or technicians, these beings who they're like technical in nature, and they helped apply the veil to me. So they do this. I don't know how to describe it. There's this thing like the spirit has certain nature and qualities, and the life has something going on in the body, and they have to like do this thing where it like, I don't know, they make everything fit somehow. So they were doing that, and they asked me one more time, "Are you sure?" And I knew that this was the point of no return. And if I said yes to here, I was in. I was in for the ride. I was strapped in. And I remember saying yes, and then the veil coming over me again. And okay, so this time my intention was, okay, just don't fight it. just let go, don't resist, just allow. And I remember, okay, so like this drop in vibration is meaningful to explain, but if you, I don't know, just as a metaphor, but if you imagine like an amp that produces a pitch, like, you know, and then you have a dial and you turn it down, and it turns down. Well, it turned all the way down and then turned down more and more and more and more and more and more, and keep cranking it down, and, you know, keep going. And that's how it felt in the vibration of the being coming down into this super dense, super tight, super cut off, you know, like going to the vacuum of space, I think is a good metaphor I like to use. It's like you go to a place where there's just no heat and no air. There's just empty space. That's how it felt, but also super dense, like coming down and being shoved into a tuna can, you know, like a fish can. And it was incredibly jarring, but I just strove not to fight it. And okay, so one of the things I had asked before in the review process was I had asked to have a small amount of memory this time. I said, I don't want to forget everything. I want to have just a tiny little amount of memory, just a tiny little bit, you know, and they said I could do that. They had said that I could do that, but it would make it more challenging. It would make this life more difficult because the contrast would be even greater. And at the time I knew that even that contrast was like all contrast, an opportunity for growth. So I accepted. So anyway, as the veil came over me now, I was feeling this, and there was like this little window open that I surmise, I don't know for certain, but I think had to do with that request, because I had this like little window open that was not veiled all the way. And I remember like holding on for a super long time and being like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, and sending a signal back through the window. Did it take back to the technicians, and then sending one signal back, yes. So I knew that the veil had been successfully applied, and so I allowed myself to be in the womb in peace, and for a while. So then I was there for a while, okay, and it was all good. And then eventually I said, I'm not doing this. This is like once again the darkness and the cutoffness and the lack of connectedness, and I was like, I'm not doing this. Again. So again, I reached this point where I'm like, this is ridiculous. This is just so ridiculous. So at that moment, I began to summon my energy again so that I could fight my way out again. But as that happened, I had this very humbling moment, and it's like the most holy, precious memory for me. But I remember the Spirit of God coming to me and showing me that I was still, well, showing me what I was still all that is. It showed me the stars and the solar system, and I remember feeling the churning of the sun and the joy of that, and knowing that was still me. And the Spirit said to me, this is still what you are. You can never not be this. The most holy thing for me to remember, because that's what we really are. That's what all of us really are.